Hello and welcome to this latest video. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the recently announced USD plugin for 3ds Max. So this was just announced this week. Here's the article on cgchannel.com and it goes to all the basic information that you're going to need. And it's really good to see Autodesk actually do this and also for 3ds Max as well, because to date, since USD was first launched in the public domain as open source, it's only from an Autodesk point of view, it's only Maya that's had some of that love around USD. So it's really good to see them starting to look at implementing it into 3ds Max. And also it's really good to see them put it out as a public beta. I mean, you can get involved into the beta programs, but that's not always applicable to some people. But having it as a public beta, I think is a really good thing. And hopefully people can then download it and hopefully provide some feedback to the developers. The article's got all the basic information you need. There is also details of a EULA that you may want to look at if it's applicable to you, just to double check. But the main thing, the key things of this is that you've got to be a registered 3ds Max user to use this, and also it will only work in the latest version, 3ds Max 2022. If you go to the public help documents as well, this has now been updated. There's now a section here, USD for 3ds Max, and this will contain all the basic information, the release notes, and how it's actually going to work. There's also details here of how to install it as well, which is key because you're going to need an Autodesk account and official license to get hold of this. There's two ways. You can either go through the desktop app or go through the portal with your Autodesk account. If you're part of a larger organization and you're not the administrator for these things, then get on to whoever that person is and have them download it for you, and I'm sure they can install it. Anyway, I'm going to basically use the Autodesk desktop app because I'm just a person on my own. And as you can see, when you fire it up, it looks for all the products you've got installed if you haven't done so already. And you can see here, second one down on the column, USD for 3ds Max 2022 0.1 is the release. There's also a hotfix here for 2022 now, and also an update to the Retopo tools. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to install these now, and then we'll catch up on the other side and start to explore USD for 3ds Max. Okay, so we're in Max 2022. Plugin installed, no problem. Max booted, no problem. No errors or anything like that. Looking around the UI, there's no special USD button or menu that I could see. So I'm assuming right now the only way you get to it is just using the file import export options. So let's start there. So we're going to go to File, Import. We're going to use the kitchen set from Pixar because it's tried and tested. It's the baseline data set as well for USD, so it's well recognized. Now, the file types here, Universal Scene Description appears in the list. It only lists the three basic ones of USD, USDA, and USDC. There's no USDZ on the importer that I could tell. I'm just going to use kitchen set and just go open. So straight away we're presented with this dialog box. This all looks fairly straightforward. We've got the path. See materials just get converted. There's no other option to that at all that I could tell. We've got the hierarchy here, which is perfect. So this is exactly what we expect to see when working with USD, being able to see the hierarchy. Now, from my understanding of documentation, it's one thing to be careful here. At the moment, I've got the root selected at the very top, and I can go through any one of these. There's no right-click options, and nothing changes when you select any one of these groups or prims. But it does say, just be careful. If I was to select this West group here and left it and clicked OK, it would only bring in that selection and everything below it. So just be mindful of that, because if you're just maybe clicking through here and just think, oh, okay, fine, and then just click OK, it's only going to bring in that. So let's go back to root and just click OK. Okay, that's it. So I didn't pause the video, I let it run. So you got a good indication there on how quick that was, and it was pretty quick compared to the Maya file import. I'd say marginally quicker by maybe a second or two. It's not, there's not much in it, but it is, I think personally, feels a little quicker. So If you want some bragging rights over Maya guys, then by all means be my guest. But yeah, it's brought in no problem, and we can see in the Scene Explorer our hierarchy is all there as we would expect it to. Now, there's nothing here as well around any kind of filters or special USD annotations, so it looks like really max data, which is what we'd expect, and that works exactly the same way as the file import from Maya. File import in Maya, when you go through the file import menu, actually just converts USD data into native Maya data, so you can't really tell the difference. So if you want to see a little bit more about that, then by all means check out the video on my channel. But this all looks perfectly fine. If we select it, there's really not much else here. There's only this option here that says USD, and that's it. And it says it's USD assembly. We just go down, do the group, change it to USD group, and then the kitchen one, that's changed to a USD component. So we've got some basic USD terminology there. That's really about it. From what I could tell by clicking around here and some of these options here, everything comes into here as an edit poly. There's nothing in here that shows that it's any kind of special mesh, except this option here says USD. It's got USD hidden, but when I clicked that didn't work. So that might be a bug or just early implementation. So I'm not really going to take that at face value at the moment, but everything else looks pretty much the same. If we go in, you'll notice a lot of the models and the normals aren't smoothed out. That I think just could be just how Max is different to say Maya. When you bring this set into Maya, the mesh is smooth, but the subdivisions might be a bit lower. Whereas here, you've not only got the subdivisions, but also smoother of normals. So what you're going to have to do here is obviously go to your modifiers and then bring in do a smooth. So for now, and there you go, you've smoothed it off, and that's literally about it. Or you may want to go into here, go into your mesh smooth, for example, in the edit poly, just increase that a little bit, and then you can apply your smooth modifier on top of that. So again, essentially you're working with it as if it's just standard max data, really, and that's really about it. So that all looks perfectly fine. So yeah, so we've got import, so we've got data in, now we've got to get it back out. I'm just going to select the top of the hierarchy, and we'll go to File, Export. So I did a test earlier on, so I'm just going to do another one. Do demo fashion. Here's one I did earlier, and save that. So we've got some basic options here, which we can now look at. Our path is all self-explanatory. We can choose the format, ASCII or binary. There is an option here for USDZ, but it's grayed out, which is slightly frustrating. But quick check in the documentation on the 3ds Max online help, it says that you've got to type in USDZ into your output file name for it to be selected or to be an option. And we can test that out in a moment. That's exactly the same as the Maya workflow. So that's all perfectly fine. Up access, frame, meshes. This preserve edge augmentation is fine, not going to do anything. The bake offset transform, again, more to do, maybe you've got animation. For the normals, it does actually give some indication about what this actually is. And I think in the docs, it just says that this exports normals as USD prim vars, and that's recommended. And I think purely for compatibility, which is the whole point of USD. And again, you can choose these ones as well if you want to, but it's suggested you keep it as a prim var. For materials, there's no other option here at all, and it just says that all materials, regardless of what they are, if you've got a V-Ray setup or an Arnold setup or whatever, they'll all be converted to USD preview surface shaders, and that means that you can import them into other things as well. So for the time being, that's somewhat limited, but it's to be expected because it's only the very first version. Cameras and lights, again, nice and easy. We'll just click OK. And that's exporting the file. Again, not going to pause the video. We'll let it run. And there we go. So that's not too bad either. So what we can now do is all this start again. Clean our scene. Go to file import. Let's choose our second kitchen set then. And just import it. There we go. Just going to click OK. Again, not going to pause the video, let it run. And there we go. And we've got it imported. And notice as well that if you look a bit closely, that's now smoothed off. So it's remembered what I did here to smooth it off. And also here as well, although it's been collapsed down by the looks of it, that's now smoothed it off. So again, you want to go through and tidy it up and then re-export it, then you've got that round trip workflow, which is great. This is good. So we've got everything working now. We can get USD data into Max. We can apply some rudimentary basic modifications to it, and then we can export it out and then import it in for that round trip workflow. So that's just fantastic. Now, if we were to just start again, and let's just try out a couple of things whilst we're here. And again, let's just go to the import again. And as I said before, let's choose our exported kitchen set. And again, remember I said about which group you've got selected. So let's just choose this now. And let's just scroll down. I mean, again, the idea is that we can choose whatever we want here to have it working. So I'm just going to see if I can find anything. Fridge area. So I'm just going to select that. Okay. And great. Yeah. So that's exactly how we expect it to. So whatever you have selected in the option box there, it will choose that group and the hierarchy below and nothing else. So you can see it's brought in our refrigerator and it's in situ, and that's how we would expect it to. I can remember inside Maya, these are actually variations. These are variants, but at the moment there's no option to really swap between them. But again, I think that's something that's obviously going to come later. So that all makes perfect sense. Now, let's just say if we took this and wanted to now export it again, but we wanted to export it as a USDZ. So we'll just do fridge and we'll put .USDZ. And it's actually listed here as well. So save. And it's actually selected it. So that's the key thing. I can't choose anything else now. That's almost locked it in. So that's fine. I'm going to keep everything as is. Okay, that's really nice and quick. So let's now start again. Clean scene. File import. But I don't think this works. And as we can see there, it's not there. I've got my file type there. I have to literally go to all files to see it. There it is. If I select it, I can't import it. So that's really annoying. But at least you can export it. So I guess you're just going to have to, if you're a Max user and you want to use USDZ as your export format in the same way that I showed in the video around Maya, then you can't import data, you can only export it. So that's a little bit annoying, but I guess it's early days for the plugin. So again, I'm sure that will come later on. Okay, so now we've got a basic workflow going on. Let's try some other data from something like Maya. File imports. Now I'm going to use this Bugatti I've been trying out some tests with. I'm just going to choose this one here, and I'll show you why in a moment. This I know has Arnold shaders assigned to it. So if we look at this in the hierarchy, we scroll down to the bottom. We've now got our look node, and we can see here the shader groups. And now I didn't rename the shader groups, I just named the main shader itself. So this is why it looks a bit odd. So we can see now the name of my shaders I've actually assigned to this object, and if it's got any textures associated to it. And yeah, that's it. So I can see that from this import box, which is really cool. However, it won't bring these in. So hopefully over time, we'll be able to bring in the object with all the shader assignment with it as well, which would be really cool. But anyway, let's just bring that in. And in it comes. Now, what I've noticed is that if I've understood this correctly, now it looks like that it's showing all my materials, like material IDs, but these are just color-coded objects. That's really about it. If we bring in the material editor, these are just the defaults it's got here, really, and that's essentially it. There's nothing else. And if we get material and look at it from the scene, there's nothing there really. So again, all this is really showing everything's been converted to a USD preview shader. So that's all we've got, so we can actually display it. So now I guess you'd have to go through all this and then reassign the shaders, which again you can do to your own particular workflow. That's entirely down to you. What would have been good is that, again, from what I could tell, even if I bring up the slate, for example, we were to use the eyedropper, if I choose that, it doesn't really provide me with a material that I could see. So people may want to try that out who are a bit more experienced in Max than what I am. But it would have been good if it actually showed that, even if it had taken the material and then just given it a name and assigned it, which would have been a lot easier to basically hook things back up together. But I guess you've got the colors there, so it's showing the different objects, and you can go through stuff and then quickly reassign your shaders. But that's just one thing I've just noticed so far. So if anybody can improve upon that, I'd be very interested to see what they actually do. So that now works. The hierarchy, that's all there as we would expect. So that it works. It's brought it in, and I guess that's the main thing that we can expect at this moment in time with the actual plugin itself. Now, if we were to reset that and just do another import, but this time choose the other one down in number 5, then that's smaller, because I know that when I did the export test for this, I didn't choose to export the Arnold shaders. I just chose to export everything as a USD preview surface. And again, that should be noted in the hierarchy. There's no see, it's just got an initial shading group, so just one thing across everything, and that's it. So that's why. So even on the export, it gives everything the same shader, and then on the import, it's exactly the same as well. And there we go. It's brought it in again, and everything is exactly the same. Get material, see materials, there's nothing there, so you'd have to go through everything and reassign it. So it's a little bit annoying, but I guess at this moment in time we've just got data in and out, and I guess the idea is if you're working with another pipeline or another studio or another package or someone else, and they give you USD data, at least now you can get it into 3ds Max and then go from there in whatever way you want to. Okay, so there's one more thing left to look at, and I think this is really cool. Now, we know we can bring in USD data now into Max, which is great, but what we can do is, using the latest version of the Arnold renderer and the Max to Arnold plugin, we can also render USD data inside Max using Arnold. And to do that, we don't necessarily have to import the data into Max in the way that I just showed you. What we can do is essentially reference a USD file and use it like a stand-in object. Now, to do that, we're going to create an Arnold object. So we go to our side panel, click on standard primitives, go to the bottom of the menu and choose Arnold. There's now 4 options available to us. We're going to choose USD. Just going to click in the viewport to place my object. And we just get this cube, but this is fine. That's all it is. So what we're going to do now is on the side panel, it gives us a few options. So we want to point it to a USD file, which is essentially going to be loaded, you could say, into Max. I'm going to choose the kitchen set, which is our baseline data set, and it's now loaded. It's that quick. And the reason why it's that quick is because technically we're not really loading it into Max to manipulate in quite the same way. Now, it's a bounding box because we've got the display mode set to that, so we can change that to now wireframe, and now we can see our kitchen set. And we can also see the hierarchy with that kitchen set here as well at the very bottom. So we can still see what's going on inside the USD file itself. Now, the orientation's a bit off. Now, there's 2 ways to change this. We can rotate the object in what would be the x-axis, but we can also change the up axis here in the panel from Y to Z, and that now works. Now, if I get this set up to a decent camera angle, I'm going to, actually no, I'll turn off the the wireframes back to bounding box because it renders a bit odd. And that's it. So deselect. Now I'm just going to go to my viewport options, standard, active shade using Arnold. And this should now start rendering inside the viewport. There we go. So what we're doing now is we're rendering that USD file natively inside 3ds Max using the Arnold renderer. Now if we zoom in, we can see everything's looking pretty good. It's rendering nice and smooth. So we're not getting the same issues we had before with the smoothing groups. Everything seems to render perfectly fine, though we're still getting some issues with the subdivisions of the meshes here, particularly in the back of the chair. So that's something we still need to fix, and we know how to do that. Now, of course, what I can do is I can now start playing around with some of the environments. So let's bring in, say, environment mode and change the background. So we're using a bit more of a whiter sky dome, and that looks perfectly fine. We can also now start changing this environment map and sort of let's bring in a physical sky from Arnold. And there we go. That's all working pretty well. Also, and of course, we've now got complete option now to play around with whatever we're doing. There's our physical sky. I'm just going to boost the intensity up to 2. Yeah, so there we go. And you can see there that everything's shadowing very nicely. It all looks great. Now this is fine. This object's rendering okay. And what we're going to do now is bring in another USD file that we actually know has Arnold data assigned to it. So I'm just going to turn off active shade. Now I'm going to select my USD object, go back to my side panel, and this time I'm going to choose a different USD file. I'm going to choose one of my Bugatti data sets that I've been using. I'm going to choose this third option here. Now the reason why I'm choosing that is because I know that that has Arnold shaders assigned to it, but I also know that I exported this data set with the correct subdivisions in it, so that we're not going to get any odd looking meshes. So that's got everything all set correctly, and it's slightly larger as well. So I'm just clicking OK. That's now fine. It's a bit smaller, which is why we have to zoom in. And if we turn on wireframe, we can see there's our data, and we zoom in and we can see that the wireframe's a lot more dense than what we might have had previously. So we shouldn't expect any issues with the mesh smoothing in this model. Let's go back to bounding box. I'm just going to now choose active shade again. And there we go. We're now rendering this object natively inside 3ds Max, and this is a USD file which has been exported from Maya. So there we go. It all looks great. And if we just rotate around, let's center that a little bit. It all looks perfectly fine. All the materials and textures and the shaders are all assigned correctly. And if you remember when we brought in the previous file around the headlights, they were we had to increase the smoothing of the mesh to make it work. This we don't have to do that this time. It's all there, all working as we would expect it to. It's looking a bit flat, so I think what we could possibly do now is let's bring in a ground plane just to give it a bit of shadowing. Should be okay. I'm not going to really mess around with it too much. And there we go. So there's our car being rendered inside the viewport, inside Max. And remember, this was a data set which was created in Maya. A hierarchy was created inside Maya. It had all the Arnold shaders assigned to it inside Maya. And then that was exported as a USD file, a standard USD file with Arnold support, with the Arnold shaders being converted into it, and also the subdivisions also being converted correctly. And then all we're doing is we're using a USD object inside Max, and we're then referencing or pointing to that USD file that we exported, and we're now able to render that natively inside Max. So this is great. I mean, this really opens up a lot of opportunity now to 3ds Max users who want to look at and start using USD. We can bring some data in, although it's only very early days in the plugin, But if you've got another USD file which is a little bit more solid, a bit more complete, and has a more robust data set in terms of shaders, then you can render it inside Max as well. So yeah, that's it. So I hope that was really useful to you. By all means, get to the plugin, download it, install it, and have a play around with it. And if you feel like it, provide some feedback to Autodesk, because the more feedback they get, then the better plugin you're going to get as time goes on and they start developing it. So everybody wins at the end of the day. So that's the end of the video. I hope that was really useful to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time.